She found out where her husband was meeting his mistress, so she made a special reservation and couldn't believe who showed up afterwards. Leave your like and subscribe to keep following us. The humid, salty air of Miami, thick with the scent of ocean and city streets, seemed to weigh heavier on Samantha Reed's shoulders than ever before. For 5 years, that same air had been the backdrop to a life she considered, if not perfect, at least solidly built. The condo in South Beach, with its spacious balcony catching the evening breeze off the Atlantic, symbolized their shared success. There, she and Jonathan, her husband, had sketched out their future. He, a renowned civil engineer with an easy smile and ambition coursing through his veins. She, a sharp tax attorney, methodical and brilliant, who viewed the world through the logic of contracts and the clarity of regulations. Together they planned the next big step, Reed and Turner construction, a dream that would merge his technical expertise with her legal acumen. It was a life plan, a castle built on the foundation of mutual trust. Or so she thought. The first crack in that foundation wasn't a thunderclap, but a whisper, a discordant note in the well-rehearsed symphony of their lives. It started about 3, maybe 4 months ago. Wednesdays, once an ordinary day, became Jonathan's territory. "Important meeting with a new investor, babe," he'd say, adjusting his tie in an almost theatrical way. "We're closing a big project up in Broward County." The meetings invariably stretched until the edge of midnight. He'd come home with the scent of victory on his lips and a fatigue that seemed more like euphoria than exhaustion. Samantha, immersed in her own cases and deadlines, accepted it. His success was their success. The construction firm was closer with every deal he signed. However, the repetition began to erode the plausibility of the story. Every single Wednesday, the same alibi, the same arrival time, and then other details, small as grains of sand, started piling up, scratching the polished surface of their marriage. His cologne changed. The classic woody one she'd given him for his birthday was replaced by a fresher, citrusy scent, a fragrance that didn't belong to the man she knew, but to a version of him that seemed to exist only on those Wednesday nights. Then came the phone. Jonathan, who had always been careless with his device, leaving it on the coffee table or the kitchen charger, started guarding it like a state secret. The screen, once face up, now turned downward. Notifications, once audible, were silenced, and the message threads she'd glimpsed would vanish. He'd developed the habit of deleting entire histories, a digital cleanup that rang alarm bells in Samantha's analytical mind. Distrust, once planted, is like a weed. It grows in the dark, silently, until it chokes everything around it. Samantha felt foolish. She, the attorney who could sniff out inconsistencies in financial statements from miles away, was blind to those happening under her own roof. Their peaceful routine became a minefield of doubts. Breakfast, once a ritual of companionship, now felt like a silent interrogation. She watched him sip his coffee, searching for a tremor in his hands, a shift in his gaze. He, in turn, seemed oblivious. Or perhaps he was an even better actor than she imagined, maintaining the facade of normalcy with exasperating calm. The idea of betrayal was a poison she refused to swallow, but the antidote of trust was running out. The truth, when it finally revealed itself, didn't come as a confession or a caught-in-the-act moment, but as a cold, impersonal piece of paper. It was a Sunday night, and Samantha, as she did every month, sat at the dining table with her laptop to organize their finances. It was a task she performed with surgical precision, reconciling statements, paying bills, planning investments. That's when she opened the statement for Jonathan's supplementary credit card. Her eyes scanned the lines of routine expenses, business lunches, gas stations, the gym membership, all within pattern. Until one line jumped off the page, highlighted not by color but by its anomaly. The Palm Grove restaurant, $487.50. The date, a Wednesday. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine, a shiver unrelated to the air conditioning. The Palm Grove. She knew the place. An upscale spot in Coral Gables, famous for its intimate atmosphere, signature dishes, and especially for being a go-to for couples on romantic dates. It wasn't by any means the kind of venue for an important client meeting. A dinner for two by the amount, A sharp stab, the first real pain of betrayal, pierced her chest, but her attorney's mind took control, silencing the heart that was beginning to shatter. One expense could be a coincidence, a slip. Maybe he took an important client there after all. She scrolled back to the previous month's statement, and there it was again. The Palm Grove Restaurant, $512. Another Wednesday. Her blood ran cold. The coincidence was now a pattern. With trembling hands, she opened the statement from 2 months prior, and the pattern confirmed itself, screaming from the computer screen. The Palm Grove Restaurant, $495 errors. 3 months, 3 expensive dinners, always on Wednesdays, always at the same love nest disguised as a restaurant. Jonathan's narrative, once so solid, crumbled in an instant. The important meetings weren't in conference rooms, but by candlelight, washed down with expensive wine. And he wasn't closing deals. He was building a second life, funded by the money and trust she placed in him. That night Samantha didn't sleep. The man snoring softly beside her, the same one who'd give her a good morning kiss come dawn, was a stranger. The condo, once a safe haven, now felt like a crime scene. Every object, every photo on the wall, every shared memory was tainted by the lie. Distrust was no longer a suspicion. It was a painful certainty, an open wound. And Samantha, the woman who always solved problems with logic and law, knew this wound wouldn't heal with an apology. She needed more. She needed proof, names, a face for the betrayal. The attorney within her was awakening, not to save her marriage, but to build a case. The silent war had been declared, and she had no intention of losing it. The night dragged on with the slowness of torture. Every creak in the condo, every headlight sweeping across the bedroom wall, was a reminder of the exposed fracture in her life. Beside her, Jonathan slept the sleep of the righteous, or perhaps the exhausted from a double life. Samantha, on the other hand, felt her mind buzzing with an icy, frightening clarity. The pain was there, a burning ember under her ribs, but overlaying it, a layer of professional pragmatism solidified. She was an attorney. And attorneys don't drown in emotions. They channel them, turning hurt into strategy, tears into ammunition. The pattern was established, the first puzzle piece fitted. Now, it was time to find the others. She didn't want just confirmation of an affair. She wanted its complete anatomy. She wanted to understand the extent, the depth, and above all, the identity of her husband's accomplice. In the days that followed, Samantha moved with the stealth of a hunter. The condo, once a home, became her observation field. She was the embodiment of normalcy, smiling at the right moments, asking about Jonathan's day with the same tone of interest as always, but her senses were heightened, capturing every detail that had previously gone unnoticed. The monitoring of expenses, which began with the digital statement, became a meticulous operation. She no longer waited for the monthly close. She enabled notifications on the banking app for his card, getting an alert for every new transaction. Every coffee, every lunch, every tank of gas was a point on the map of Jonathan's secret life, and she was determined to connect them all. The next Wednesday arrived with an almost palpable tension. Jonathan repeated the familiar script. The long shower, the careful choice of shirt, a blue linen one she'd bought for him, the citrusy cologne that now made her nauseous. Long meeting tonight, Sam. Project hitting the final phase. Don't wait up, he said, planting a kiss on her forehead. The gesture, once a seal of affection, now felt like the cold touch of a traitor. She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Okay, honey. Good luck. As soon as the door closed and the sound of his car engine faded down the street, the attorney took the wife's place. Her phone buzzed at 8:17 p.m., the notification she'd been waiting for. Purchase approved for $528.90. Establishment, the Palm Grove Restaurant. The confirmation was a punch to the gut, but also the adrenaline she needed. The pattern wasn't just a suspicion, it was a law. But the dinners were only the skeleton of the story. Samantha needed flesh, substance. The investigation deepened. She began checking the pockets of his jackets before sending them to the dry cleaners, inspecting the glove compartment of his car under the pretext of looking for a document. and it was in the pocket of a dark blazer, forgotten in the back of the closet, that she found the first loose thread that would lead to the full ball of yarn. A small thermal paper receipt, nearly faded. It wasn't from a restaurant. It was from a jewelry store. Tiffany & Co. at Aventura Mall. The date was 6 weeks ago. The item description: yellow gold earrings with cognac diamonds. The amount made her eyes sting. 7,800 francs. Samantha felt the air leave her lungs. She hadn't received jewelry from Jonathan in over a year. Those earrings, expensive and delicate, weren't in her jewelry box. They adorned the ears of another woman, a woman who dined with her husband on Wednesdays. The discovery was like pouring gasoline on the ember of her pain. The betrayal now had a cost, a monetary value that made everything more sordid, more calculated. It wasn't just an affair, a carnal slip. It was an investment. Jonathan was investing in someone else, using the money they'd saved together for the construction firm, for their future. The rage, cold and cutting, began to overtake the sadness. With the jewelry receipt in hand, she continued her search, now more determined. The next find came from an unlikely place, the trash bin in his home office. Among crumpled drafts and reports, a bag from a luxury perfumery, Sephora. Inside, just the invoice. The purchase, a bottle of La Vie est Belle by Lancôme, a floral, sweet perfume, unmistakably feminine. And the date matched the week he'd switched his own cologne. The piece clicked into place with a painful snap. The new scent he wore wasn't for himself. It was hers, imprinted on his skin, on his clothes, an olfactory ghost he brought into their home, into their bed. Samantha's heart didn't just tighten. It knotted in agony and fury. The man she'd dreamed of growing old with, the partner she shared plans and a bank account with, wasn't just closing deals. He was building a parallel romance, complete with all the clichés: candlelit dinners, expensive jewelry, imported perfumes. The image of Jonathan laughing with another woman, handing her a velvet box, her scent mingling with his, haunted her thoughts. The pain was visceral, but Samantha's mind operated on another frequency. Suspicions weren't enough. Receipts were strong but circumstantial. In a courtroom, a good defense lawyer, and she knew many, could dismantle it all. He could claim it was a gift for a client, a business gesture. Lies, yes, but hard to refute without ironclad proof. Samantha wanted more than certainty for herself. She wanted irrefutable truth, the kind of evidence that left no room for denial, for manipulation. She wanted the type of proof that, when presented, would make Jonathan's world crumble as completely as hers was crumbling inside. The attorney in her knew she needed a name, a face. The receipts were the trail, the breadcrumbs left by the traitor. The one from the jewelry store had been paid with the card, but the one from the perfumery, curiously, had a handwritten note on the back, a hasty scrawl: "Deliver to Vanessa, Ocean View Towers, Apt 1201. Vanessa." The name echoed in the silence of the office. It was the first time the other had an identity. She was no longer a shadow, an anonymous figure. She was Vanessa, and she lived in Ocean View Towers. Samantha felt her pulse quicken. The hunt had leveled up. She was no longer just following the money, she was following a name. The certainty she sought was closer than ever, and with it, the promise of a confrontation that would change everything forever. The sadness was still there, a dark ocean in her soul, but on the surface now sailed a warship, and Samantha was at the helm, her course set straight for the heart of the lie. Vanessa. The name was both ordinary and extraordinary, the key that could unlock the door to the hidden side of Jonathan's life. With the crumpled piece of paper in hand, the perfumery invoice, Samantha felt like a detective facing the decisive clue. Deliver to Vanessa, Ocean View Towers, Apt 1201. Ocean View Towers. A quick online search confirmed its location. A sleek, high-rise condo on Collins Avenue overlooking the ocean, a prestigious address. Her husband's Mistress wasn't just any fling. She lived in one of the priciest square footages in the city. Samantha's anger gained a new dimension, one of social injustice. While she and Jonathan counted pennies for the construction firm project, he was funding someone else's luxury. The attorney within her, however, knew a first name and an address weren't enough. She needed a full name, a social security number, and legal identity. The digital age, which facilitated betrayal, was also a powerful tool for investigation. Samantha sat at her laptop not as a betrayed wife, but as the relentless professional she was. She started with the basics, cross-referencing Vanessa with the building's address on social media and public databases she accessed through her firm. The result came faster than expected. Vanessa Caldwell. Architect, 31 years old. The profession made a perverse kind of sense. Jonathan, an engineer, and Vanessa, an architect. Their partnership went beyond the bedroom. It was professional, an affinity he perhaps felt was missing with Samantha, the attorney of numbers and laws. The idea wounded her deeply. With a full name, the world opened up. First stop was Instagram. The profile was public. Evanescent home. The profile picture showed a woman with a radiant smile, blonde hair lit by the sun, with Miami's ocean in the background. It was the kind of beauty that seemed effortless, natural, almost irritating in its perfection. Samantha clicked, and what she saw made her hold her breath. Vanessa's feed was a masterpiece of modern domesticity, short, aesthetically pleasing videos of cleaning routines, with tips to make the home sparkle. Tutorials on recipes that looked straight out of a cooking show, always with fresh ingredients and impeccable presentation, posts about organization, decor, and wellness. And the captions were the height of hypocrisy. Love is caring every day. Happiness lives in the small gestures, building a home full of peace and affection. Samantha scrolled through that feed with a mix of fascination and revulsion. There was the woman destroying her marriage, posing as the guardian of the home, the exemplary wife. It was a performance, and a very well-executed one. Vanessa sold the image of the perfect woman, the dedicated homemaker who found joy in serving, in creating a nest of love. And the most ironic part, she had an audience, thousands of followers who liked, commented, praised her dedication. "You inspire me so much, Van," said one comment. "Life goals," exclaimed another. Samantha tasted bitterness in her mouth. Vanessa wasn't just a mistress. She was a public fraud, monetizing a lie, building a personal brand on the rotten foundation of adultery. But the performance of exemplary wife implied the existence of a husband, and if there was a husband, he was another victim in that story. Samantha's mind, trained to see all angles of a case, immediately turned to him. Who was the man behind that facade of perfection? Searching Vanessa Caldwell in public records revealed what Instagram hid. She was married for 6 years to Ryan Caldwell. A new search, and Ryan's profile appeared. It was more low-key, with photos of landscapes, boats, and occasionally a smiling shot next to Vanessa. His profession, listed in the bio, was the piece that made the whole puzzle fit in a macabre way. Offshore oil rig worker for ExxonMobil. Samantha knew what that meant. Shift work. 14-14 or 21-21 schedules. 14 days at sea, isolated from the world, and 14 days at home. 14 days of absence, 14 days of opportunity. With her heart pounding unevenly, Samantha did what any good investigator would. She cross-checked the dates. She opened her calendar and marked every Wednesday Jonathan had his meetings. Then she went to Ryan's profile and analyzed his post dates. It was a frighteningly clear pattern. His photos from the rig, with captions like "another tour starting" or "counting down the days to get back home," matched perfectly with the weeks of Jonathan and Vanessa's dinners. During the periods when Ryan was offshore, working to support the home and his wife's luxury life, she was free to live her romance with Jonathan. The revelation was devastating and at the same time enlightening. Vanessa wasn't just cheating on her husband, she was orchestrating her double life with the precision of a project timeline. Wednesday was their day, the safe day, the day when the husband was hundreds of miles away and the wife too busy with work to ask questions. It was a perfect arrangement, a crime with a built-in alibi. Jonathan and Vanessa weren't just lovers, they were partners in a conspiracy of deceptions. They met at the Palm Grove, laughed, toasted, exchanged confidences and caresses, behaving like a legitimate, passionate couple, while their respective halves, Samantha and Ryan, believed the carefully told lies. Samantha's pain now split, transforming into an unexpected empathy for that unknown man, Ryan. He too was a victim, a pawn in his wife's sordid game. Samantha closed her laptop, but the image of Vanessa smiling on her Instagram remained etched in her mind. The perfect influencer, the dedicated wife. The hypocrisy was so vast, so audacious, it bordered on psychopathic. Vanessa wasn't just having an affair, she was living a fantasy, funded by two different men and broadcasting an edited, sanctified version of that fantasy to the world. Samantha's rage crystallized into a cold resolution like steel. This couldn't continue. The farce had to end. And it wouldn't be with a quiet, private confrontation. A public fraud deserved a public exposure. The plan began to form in her mind, no longer just as revenge but as an act of justice. Justice for her and justice for Ryan. The curtain on Vanessa Caldwell's theater was about to fall, and Samantha would make sure to be in the front row for the final act. The discovery of Vanessa's identity and her double life didn't bring Samantha peace, but a sharpened focus, a clarity of purpose she hadn't felt in months. The pain was still there, a constant hum in the depths of her soul, but now she had a target, a goal. The question was no longer if she would act, but how. An impulsive confrontation, driven by anger, would be satisfying for a moment, but ineffective long-term. Jonathan and Vanessa were masters of manipulation. They'd deny, twist facts, maybe even make her seem like the crazy, jealous wife. No, the response lay not in passion, but in precision. She was an attorney, and her revenge would be a legal process, executed with the coldness of strategic calculation. Their humiliation wouldn't be an accident, but an orchestrated consequence. Samantha's initial plan was methodical. She'd continue monitoring Ryan Caldwell's routine through his social media. The goal was to pinpoint exactly when his next offshore shift began. Once he was safely at sea, she'd set the stage. The idea was to contact him, perhaps through an intermediary, a private investigator, to present the evidence discreetly. She imagined sending an anonymous dossier to his company or to a close family member. She wanted Ryan to know the truth, but without revealing her own identity at first. She'd be the hidden director of this play, moving the actors on stage until the inevitable climax. Vanessa's exposure would come from her own husband, making the impact even more devastating. It would be the perfect implosion, coming from within the very home Vanessa pretended to cherish. However, while Samantha wove her web with patience and intelligence, fate, that chaotic and unpredictable force, was already moving its own pieces on a parallel board. Hundreds of miles away, on an oil rig rocking over the dark waters of the Gulf of Mexico, Ryan Caldwell was living his own version of the hell of distrust. Love, for him, had always been synonymous with absence. He loved Vanessa through longing, through spotty video calls, through delayed messages. He worked 14 days straight, in an isolated and dangerous environment, motivated by her image, by the promise of the home waiting for him. He supported the dream, the ocean view condo, the vacations, the whims. And in return, he asked only for the fidelity that was the basis of his sacrifice. But in recent months, the connection between them seemed as unstable as the rig's Wi-Fi. The calls that used to be long and full of daily details became short, monosyllabic. "How was your day, love?" he'd ask, eager for a glimpse of the life he helped build. "Busy? Normal?" she'd reply, with a vague tone that didn't invite more questions. The good-night messages from him were often answered only the next morning, with the excuse that she'd fallen asleep early. And Wednesdays. Wednesdays were the worst. It was the day she seemed to vanish. Calls went straight to voicemail. Messages stayed with a single checkmark for hours. The excuse was always the same. "Dinner with the girls, hun. Left my phone in my purse." Ryan, a practical and straightforward man, tried to ignore the signs. He trusted Vanessa, or rather, he wanted to trust. But the seed of doubt, once planted in a lonely heart in the middle of the ocean, grows monstrously. Distrust gnawed at him during long night shifts. He started paying attention to details. The girls she dined with were never named. Photos of those outings, which she used to post frequently, stopped completely. Paranoia set in, He asked a friend in Miami to discreetly drive by their building on a Wednesday night. The friend confirmed. Her car wasn't in the garage. The final straw, however, came from the same source that had alerted Samantha, the bank statement. Ryan had access to their joint account, and on impulse he checked the expenses. And there it was, repeating like a macabre echo. The Palm Grove restaurant. Once. Twice. 3 times. Always on Wednesdays. Always during his offshore shifts. The restaurant's name hit him like a violent wave. He'd taken her there himself for their anniversary. He knew the ambience, the low music, the tables for 2. That wasn't a dinner with the girls. That was a romantic rendezvous. The pain of betrayal, pure and savage, assaulted him right there in the cramped cabin on the rig. The sacrifice, the work, the longing. It all seemed like a bad joke. In that moment, Ryan made a decision. He wouldn't confront Vanessa over the phone. He wouldn't give her a chance to lie, to prepare. He needed to see with his own eyes. His next shift was scheduled for a Tuesday. He said goodbye to Vanessa at the airport as he always did. Her hug felt fake, the kiss rushed. He went through the security gate, waved, and disappeared down the corridor. But instead of heading to the plane that would take him to the rig, he grabbed a cab and went to a cheap hotel downtown. He'd told his company about a fabricated family emergency, securing a 24-hour leave. He pretended to board, but stayed. The following Wednesday would be Judgment Day, and so unaware of each other's existence, Samantha and Ryan prepared for the same night, the same place, driven by the same pain. Samantha, with her calculated strategy, planning every step, every word. Ryan, with his raw hurt, guided by a visceral instinct for confirmation. 2 wounded souls, orbiting the same epicenter of deceit, were on a collision course. Fate, with its cruel irony, was about to unite them not by love, but by the betrayal they both shared. Wednesday night at the Palm Grove wouldn't just be the stage for the end of an affair, it would be the unexpected meeting of 2 victims, ready to together topple their partner's castle of lies. The perfect storm was brewing. Wednesday dawned under a leaden sky, Miami's heavy gray air foreshadowing the storm forming on the horizon of Samantha's life. For the rest of the city, it was an ordinary day, but for her, it was D-Day. Tension had settled into her body like an electric current, a mix of dread and a dark excitement. All day she moved on a kind of autopilot, handling her duties at the law firm with robotic efficiency. She reviewed contracts, drafted motions, attended meetings, but her mind was elsewhere, rehearsing the approaching confrontation, going over every detail of the plan. She wouldn't leave it to chance. The night would be hers, and she'd be the only one in control. Arriving home late afternoon, she found Jonathan already in the midst of his preparation ritual. Steam escaped from the bathroom door, and the sound of his voice humming a tune was an affront to Samantha's silent pain. He emerged from the shower wrapped in a towel, hair damp, face clean-shaven, looking younger, more vibrant than in recent months. He was happy. The prospect of his illicit meeting rejuvenated him, and that realization was like a fresh cut to Samantha's wound. He dressed with a care he hadn't shown her in years, the blue linen shirt impeccably ironed, the neutral khaki pants, and finally the finishing touch, the citrusy cologne sprayed generously on his neck and wrists, her scent. The scent of betrayal. He stopped in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting his collar, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He turned to Samantha, who watched him from the living room couch, pretending to read a book. His smile widened, a smile that once melted her and now disgusted her. "Gonna be a long meeting tonight, love, don't wait up," he said, the words flowing with an ease that attested to his practice in the art of deception. He approached and leaned down to kiss her forehead. Samantha didn't move, receiving the cold touch on her skin like the final seal on a pact of war. "Okay, good luck," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady, an oasis of calm amid the whirlwind of her emotions. He grabbed his car keys from the coffee table, gave one last wink and left, closing the door behind him, oblivious to the fact that he was leaving behind not a deceived wife, but an executor of sentences. Samantha waited 10 minutes. 10 minutes that stretched into eternity as she listened to the sound of her own heart hammering against her ribs. Then she stood up, The book fell to the floor, forgotten. She went upstairs to the bedroom and changed out of her work clothes into a simple, elegant black dress, armor for the battle ahead. Minimal makeup, just enough to hide the dark circles from a sleepless night. On her feet, low-heeled shoes, steady, so there wouldn't be a single tremor in her steps. Looking in the mirror, she didn't see a victim. She saw a woman in control of her destiny, ready to claim her truth. She drove to Coral Gables with a frightening calm. Miami's chaotic traffic seemed to move in slow motion. She wasn't in a hurry. She knew exactly where he'd be, who he'd be with. She parked on a side street a safe distance away, but with a clear view of the Palm Grove's entrance. The restaurant glowed in the night, a beacon of sophistication and secrets. Couples entered hand in hand, laughing, immersed in their own bubbles of happiness, oblivious to the drama about to unfold. Samantha sat in the dark car, engine off, and waited. The wait was part of the strategy, part of the torture she imposed on herself, and would soon impose on them. Meanwhile, a few yards away, in another car parked in the shadow of a palm tree, Ryan Caldwell felt blood pulsing in his temples. He'd been there for nearly an hour, his heart an anvil in his chest. Every car that pulled up, every couple that stepped out was a new spasm of anxiety. He'd seen Jonathan's car arrive, a luxury sedan he didn't recognize, saw a tall, well-dressed man get out and enter the restaurant. But where was Vanessa? Doubt began to corrode him. What if he was wrong? What if she was really with the girls somewhere else? The idea of having set all this up, of lying to his company, only to be chasing ghosts of his own paranoia, was humiliating. Then, he saw her. Vanessa stepped out of a cab, and the air seemed to flee Ryan's lungs. She was stunning, wearing a vibrant red dress that hugged her curves and contrasted with her blonde hair. She walked with a confidence, a gleam in her eye, that he hadn't seen in a long time. It was the Vanessa from social media, the radiant and full-of-life woman, but that joy wasn't for him. She stopped at the restaurant entrance, checked her phone, smiled, and went in. Ryan felt a physical pain, a stab so sharp it made him double over the steering wheel. The confirmation was 1,000 times worse than the suspicion. He breathed deeply, the air entering his lungs like ground glass. He opened the car door. The time had come. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was one of elegant buzz, low conversations, the clink of silverware, a soft melody of jazz in the background. Jonathan was already at a more secluded table, near a window overlooking an internal garden. When Vanessa approached, he stood and greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, a gesture too intimate for a mere business meeting. They sat, and the conversation flowed immediately, easy, complicit. They laughed, their heads tilted toward each other, creating a private world at that table. The waiter brought a bottle of wine, and they toasted, eyes locked. From outside, Samantha watched the scene through the window. Her car positioned at a perfect angle. She saw it all. The kiss, the smiles, the toast. And then she saw the detail that made her blood boil and freeze at once. On Vanessa's ears, sparkling under the amber light of the restaurant, were the earrings, the yellow gold ones with cognac diamonds, the same from the Tiffany & Co. receipt, the final, irrefutable proof, dangling from the ears of the woman smiling at her husband. That was the trigger. The strategic calm gave way to a wave of icy fury. Enough waiting, enough watching. It was time to enter the scene. Samantha got out of the car, her steps firm on the pavement. She crossed the street, head held high, eyes fixed on the restaurant entrance. Each step was deliberate, heavy with the weight of the betrayal she carried. The hostess greeted her with a professional smile. "Table for one?" she asked. "No, thank you. I'm just joining a meeting," Samantha replied, her voice emerging with a coldness that surprised even her. She passed the hostess before the girl could react and entered the main dining room. Her eyes scanned the space and found them immediately. Their table was an oasis of intimacy amid the crowd. She began walking toward them, the sound of her heels on the wooden floor a discreet announcement of her arrival. The restaurant seemed to vanish. Only that path existed, that table, those two smiling faces that would soon contort in shock. She was a few yards away, her heart beating a war rhythm. She breathed deeply, preparing the first words, the opening line she'd rehearsed so many times. But before any sound could leave her mouth, a presence materialized beside her. A tall man with broad shoulders who seemed out of place in that refined setting. He too stared fixedly at the same table, his face a mask of pain and contained fury. He turned to her, their eyes meeting for a fraction of a second, and in his gaze Samantha recognized the same devastation she felt in her own soul. He didn't need to introduce himself. She knew who he was. The man stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of her, and his voice, deep and laden with an oceanic bitterness, cut through the air, not loud, but with a weight that seemed to silence the entire restaurant. "Interesting," he said, the words dripping sarcasm. "My wife likes coming here on Wednesdays, too." It was Ryan. He hadn't gone offshore. The effect was instantaneous and cataclysmic. At the table, the laughter died. The smiles froze. Jonathan was the first to look up, and his face underwent a grotesque transformation. The color drained, leaving a cadaverous pallor. His eyes widened in pure terror, darting from Ryan's imposing figure to Samantha's impassive face, standing right behind. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It was the image of a man whose entire life had just collapsed on his head. Vanessa, noticing the change on Jonathan's face, turned slowly. Her confident smile dissolved like sand. Seeing Ryan standing there, her husband who should have been hundreds of miles offshore, her face twisted into a mask of disbelief and panic. Her eyes, the same ones that sparkled with joy seconds before, were now wide with dread. She looked from Ryan to Samantha, an elegant and unknown woman, and the gears in her mind finally clicked into place with an audible snap. The trap wasn't for one of them. It was for both. Ryan stood beside Samantha, a silent guardian of their shared pain, eyes fixed on the now silent couple, completely paralyzed, exposed under the restaurant's lights. The buzz of conversations around them diminished, people at nearby tables starting to realize something was wrong. The air grew thick, charged with imminent humiliation. The romantic dinner was over. The real spectacle was just beginning. The silence that fell over Jonathan and Vanessa's table wasn't an ordinary silence. It was a vacuum, an absence of sound so dense and heavy, it seemed to have its own mass, bending the light and air around it. The elegant buzz of the restaurant, the conversations, the clink of glasses, all dissolved into distant white noise. For the four protagonists in that frozen scene, only the charged space between them existed. Jonathan's face, once a portrait of success and self-assurance, was now a pale canvas of pure panic. His eyes jumped from Samantha to Ryan, like a cornered animal seeking a non-existent escape route. Vanessa, meanwhile, seemed to have shrunk in her vibrant red dress. The radiant influencer's persona had shattered, revealing the terrified woman beneath, her gaze fixed on Ryan as if seeing a ghost. It was Samantha who broke the spell. With a calm she didn't know she possessed, she stepped forward, circling Ryan's immobile figure. Each movement was deliberate, graceful, that of a queen reclaiming her throne. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her weapon was her composure. She stopped beside the table, her presence looming over the adulterous couple. Slowly she opened her purse and pulled out not one, but two phones, her own and a second simpler one she'd bought specifically for that night. First, she took her own phone. With her thumb, she unlocked the screen and opened a prepared photo gallery. Then, with a smooth gesture, she turned the screen to Jonathan. "I thought you'd like to review some of your recent investments," she said, her voice a whisper of silk and venom. On the screen, in a slow and torturous slideshow, the images passed. Screenshots of the credit card statements with the Palm Grove dinners highlighted in yellow, the photo of the Tiffany & Coben receipt, the image of the perfumery invoice with the note Vanessa, and for the grand finale, clear photos of the diamond earrings dangling from Vanessa's ears, taken minutes earlier from outside the restaurant. Jonathan recoiled in his chair as if punched. He couldn't look away from the screen, witnessing the chronicle of his betrayal exposed in high definition. Then, Samantha turned to Vanessa, who watched her with wide, pleading eyes. "And for you, Vanessa?" Samantha continued, picking up the second phone. "I thought you'd like to learn a bit more about your new business partner." She dialed a number. The phone rang once before being answered, and the call was put on speaker, the sound cutting through the table's silence. "Hello?" said a female voice, cautious. "Good evening, this is Samantha Reed. I'm Jonathan Turner's wife," Samantha said, her voice clear and firm. "I believe you're the architect handling our beach house project in Palm Beach, the one that's been stalled for 3 months because, according to my husband, we're having cash flow issues." There was a pause on the other end. "Yes, that's me." "Mrs. Reed, I'm so sorry, but Jonathan told me—" "I know what he told you," Samantha interrupted. "He probably said the $150,000 we transferred to our construction firm's account last month just vanished in operational expenses. What he must not have mentioned is that those expenses included jewelry, dinners, and apparently funding a double life." The architect on the other end went silent. Samantha continued, now looking directly at Jonathan. "I also called your partner on the development project in Fort Lauderdale, the one you said was stringing you along. Funny, he told me he's been waiting 2 months for a capital injection you swore you'd make. Guess where the money went, Jonathan?" Jonathan's face contorted. This went beyond marital infidelity. Samantha, with surgical precision, was dissecting his professional life, exposing not just his unfaithfulness, but his incompetence and embezzlement. He wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a fraudulent businessman. It was then that Ryan, who until that moment had remained like a statue of contained fury, finally moved. He didn't address Jonathan. His focus was entirely on his wife. He circled the table, stopping behind Vanessa's chair, forcing her to crane her neck to face him. His voice when he spoke was low but loaded with the weight of lonely nights at sea and shattered trust. "And to think I trusted you, Vanessa," he began, each word a blow. "While I was 200 miles off the coast, counting the hours to get back home to you were here." He gestured, encompassing the luxury restaurant, posing as the perfect homemaker on social media. He pulled his own phone from his pocket. "You know what's funniest? I saw your posts. Love is caring every day. What a joke. Whose home were you caring for, Vanessa? Because it sure wasn't ours." Vanessa began to sob, a pathetic and high-pitched sound. "Ryan, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" he retorted, his voice rising an octave. "That you used the money I earn risking my life to pay the electric bill for the condo you decorated with his gifts?" He pointed at Jonathan. "Or are you going to explain why the doorman at our building, old Mr. Ramirez, called me last week to ask if your cousin Jonathan was coming up again because he was worried about the comings and goings in the apartment while I was away?" The revelation made Vanessa choke. Her house of cards wasn't just falling, it was being set ablaze. By this point, the scene had drawn the attention of the entire restaurant. Conversations ceased. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Dozens of pairs of eyes were fixed on that table. And then, the inevitable in the digital age happened. A phone rose at a nearby table, the small red recording light on. Then another, and another. Someone recognized Vanessa's tear-streaked face. "That's that blogger," whispered a woman. "The Vanessa at home." The whisper spread like wildfire. The perfect influencer was being unmasked in real time, and the audience, once her followers, was now the crowd for her humiliation. Jonathan, seeing the phones pointed at them, finally reacted. Self-preservation instinct overrode the panic. "Enough, let's get out of here, Vanessa," he hissed, trying to stand. "You're not going anywhere," Samantha said, her voice cold as ice. She made a discreet signal, and the restaurant manager, who had been watching the scene from afar with an alarmed expression, approached hesitantly. "Manager," Samantha said with authority, "I'd like to settle the bill for this table, and I'd also like you to call the police." "Police?" Jonathan stammered. "Yes," Samantha confirmed, looking him in the eyes. "You used funds from our company, of which I'm the majority partner, for personal purposes. That has a name, Jonathan. Embezzlement. It's a crime, and as your attorney and still your wife, I suggest you stay seated." The word police was the final nail in the coffin. Jonathan slumped back into his chair, defeated. Vanessa cried hysterically, face hidden in her hands, the red dress now seeming like a shroud. Ryan just watched, his expression blank, like a man surveying the rubble of his home after a hurricane. What followed was a surreal blur. The police arrival, the low-voiced talks with the manager, the couple being escorted out of the restaurant under the flash of every customer's phone. Samantha and Ryan remained behind, alone amid the chaos they'd created. They looked at each other, two strangers united by the most intimate of pains. No words were spoken, just a slow, weary nod, a mutual acknowledgement of the loss and perhaps the beginning of liberation. In the days and months that followed, the consequences were exactly as Samantha had planned, but with an intensity even she hadn't foreseen. The videos from the restaurant went viral in an overwhelming way. The home blogger and the affair businessman became one of the most talked about topics nationwide. Vanessa was crucified online. Her profile was flooded with hate, her sponsors dropped her within hours, and the perfect influencer became a national joke, a meme about hypocrisy. Completely exposed and with nowhere to go, Ryan changed the condo locks the next day. She vanished, retreating to relatives' home in a small town upstate, erasing her digital existence and becoming a ghost. For Jonathan, the fall was equally brutal. Samantha's formal embezzlement complaint destroyed his reputation. Partners abandoned him, projects were cancelled, investors pulled out. The divorce was swift and merciless. With irrefutable proof of the affair and financial misconduct, Samantha not only secured a favorable division of assets, but also took full control of the construction firm they'd dreamed of together, rebranding it as Reed Developments. Jonathan, broken financially and morally, tried to rebuild, but his name was tainted. He moved out of Miami, a diminished man, a shadow of the successful engineer he'd once been. And Samantha? Samantha flourished. She didn't waste time looking back. She dove into work, turning Reed Developments into a success known for integrity and excellence. She reconnected with friends, traveled, learned to salsa dance, and discovered the pleasure of her own company. The pain of betrayal left a scar, yes, but scars are proof that the wound closed, that one survived. She never saw Ryan again, but heard through mutuals that he'd requested a land-based transfer, restarting his life away from the sea and memories of Vanessa. One evening, nearly a year later, sitting on her condo's balcony, the same one that had once been the scene of her distrust, Samantha gazed at the ocean, a glass of wine in hand. Miami's warm air, which once seemed to oppress her, now felt like a caress, a promise of new beginnings. She thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the anger, the meticulously planned revenge. She didn't regret it. The public humiliation wasn't an act of malice, but of restoration. It was the way she'd found to rebalance the scales, to expose the truth in all its rawness. She'd lost a husband, a life project, a version of herself that believed in fairy tales. But in the process, amid the ruins of her marriage, she'd found something infinitely more valuable. She'd found her strength, her resilience, her ability to turn the greatest pain into the foundation of her greatest victory. She'd gained herself back. And that, she concluded with a serene smile, was the only partnership that truly mattered. She raised her glass to the glittering city before her, a silent toast, not to what she'd lost, but to all she'd gained. A toast to her own unshakable peace. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here we live through every emotion, every triumph, and every fresh start together, and you help us bring even better stories. I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Samantha's place? Would you forgive a betrayal like that or let the world see what really happened? Thanks so much and see you next time.